For the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, whose worth cannot be described by speakers, whose bounties cannot be counted by calculators, and whose claim to obedience cannot be satisfied by those whom attempt to do so, whom the height of intellectual courage cannot appreciate, and the divings of understandings cannot reach. He for whose description no limit has been laid down, no time is ordained, no duration is fixed, and no eulogy exists. He brought forth creation through his omnipotence, dispersed winds through his compassion, and made firm the shaking earth with rocks. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear brothers, dear sisters, respected elders and scholars. Thank you once again for joining us in our Muharram series. As we near the day of Ashura, the days become a lot more harder for the mu'mineen, and tonight is the musibah of Abul Fazl Abbas alayhim as-salam. In regards to Abul Fazl Abbas, there is many things one can say about his character. However, I decided to pick a specific moment from the lifetime of Abul Fazl Abbas, which I'd like to share with you today. This was prior to Karbala, when Imam al-Hussein was in Makkah. Abul Fazl Abbas stood on the roof of the Kaaba and delivered a glorious, eloquent sermon just like his father would. And I'd like to point out a few lines from that sermon. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He begins and says, all praise is for Allah who honored Baytullah. All praise is for Allah who honored the house of Allah with the arrival of the father of my master, Imam Hussein alayhi as-salam. This house was nothing more than a house of stone before the appearance of Amir al-Mu'mineen. After Amir al-Mu'mineen appeared in the Kaaba, it then became the Qibla. This part is very ironic because when you're in Makkah and everyone's doing Hajj, we all suppose they're Muslims, but Abul Fadl Abbas saw them differently. He says, "O wretched kafirs and oppressors, you are not allowing the Imam of the pious to visit the Kaaba, the one who has the most right to do so. If it was not for the command of Allah and not for the unseen mysteries of Allah, and if Allah had not willed that His creation would be tested, then this Kaaba would have uprooted itself and flown to my master. But my master came here himself and honored the Kaaba. Verily the people kiss Hajr Aswad, and Hajr Aswad kisses the hands of my Mawla. The will of Allah is the will of my Mawla. The will of my Mawla is the will of my Allah. I swear by Allah, if it were not for this, then I would have attacked you the way the eagle attacks the sparrows. I would have cut you into pieces. Are you trying to compete with those who played with death during their childhood? Imagine how brave must they be. Imagine how brave must they be to do such a thing in their youth. May Allah sacrifice me upon my Mawla, who is the master of the entire universe. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our dear brother Zain, Sheikh, to the minbar for some poetry. So if you could please welcome him with the loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. نظر سے دیکھ آئے گا نظر حسین ایک ہے نظر سے دیکھ آئے گا نظر حسین ایک ہے نظر سے دیکھ آئے گا نظر حسین ایک ہے صدا کھلا ہے جس قدر وہ گھر حسین ایک ہے صدا کھلا ہے جس قدر وہ گھر حسین ایک ہے محمد میں چار ہیں علی بھی ان میں چار ہیں محمد میں چار ہیں علی بھی ان میں چار ہیں حسن بھی ان میں دو بنے یہ دین کا وقار ہے حسن بھی ان میں دو بنے یہ دین کا وقار ہے یہ بار بار سب بنے مگر حسین ایک ہے یہ بار بار سب بنے مگر حسین ایک ہے خدا کا اور حسین کا بس ایک سا مزاج ہے خدا کا اور حسین کا بس ایک سا مزاج ہے زمین اور آسمان پر انہی کا صرف راج ہے زمین انہی کا صرف راج ہے ادھر خدا بھی ایک ہے ادھر حسین ایک ہے ادھر خدا بھی ایک ہے ادھر حسین ایک ہے نظر سے دیکھ آئے گا نظر حسین ایک ہے نظر حسین ایک ہے صلوات
صلوات علی محمد و آل محمد. Before we continue the program, could I request the brothers to please come a bit more closer towards the minbar and to come in a bit more closer to create more of an atmosphere, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Continuing with part of the sermon that Abul Fazl Abbas delivered on that day, he then says, "You are repeating the same mistake that the Quraysh committed. They planned to kill Rasulullah and you are planning to kill the son of Rasulullah. The Quraysh were not successful in their evil schemes because they could not overcome Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now how can it be possible for you to kill Abu Abdullah al-Hussein when the son of that Ali is the protector of the son of Rasulullah? If you have the courage, then come and try and kill me. Then you will be able to fulfill your evil desires. I swear by Allah, as long as I am alive, you will never be successful. May Allah send His wrath upon you, your forefathers, and your offsprings. May Allah curse you, your forefathers, and your offsprings. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We will now have the narrative. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We will now have the narrative for tonight's program, which will be on the Shahada of Abul Fazl Abbas. So if I could all request you to stay tuned and inshallah take part with the narrative. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
In his last moments, Abbas was seeing the events of his past life. He was seeing himself as a child in Medina, following Hussein with a devotion. He was seeing the moment his father Ali placed his hand in the hand of Hussein, telling him that there will come a time where he will be sacrificed in defense of Hussein and his message. A faint smile of satisfaction flickered for a brief moment on his parched lips. A smile of satisfaction that he had fulfilled his father's wish. His smile flitted for a moment and vanished as he remembered the scene from a few moments ago with his darling Sakina. He saw Sakina approaching him. The children were shouting as if in chorus, Al-Atash! Al-Atash! Thirst is consuming us. The thirst is killing us. Sakina came to Abbas. She looked up at him and said,
"Oh, Uncle Abbas, you're so dear to me. Uncle, the children are thirsty. Our throats are dry and I worry that we will die if we do not drink water soon. I know you will do something to get water for us. Even if you can bring one bagful, we can relieve our dry throats. Please, Uncle Abbas."
My dear Sakina, you have broken my heart with your pleas. I will bring water back to you and the children. Remain patient, Sakina. I will return soon.
Abbas knew that he now needed to request permission from his brother Hussein before he went out to the battlefield. In the moments before this, Abbas had requested to go to battle, but the Imam had delayed his departure. Abbas was his brother. Abbas was the captain of his army. Abbas was the flag bearer. Without Abbas, there is no army.
Oh, my brother, I cannot bear the cries of the children saying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Please allow me to go out and bring them water.
On this occasion, Hussein gave Abbas permission to march out to the camp, tasking him to bring back water. Abbas marched out of the camp with a sword in one hand, the flag in the other, and the water bag on his shoulder. Abbas charged through the enemies lined up against him, and he reached the riverbank. He jumped down from his horse and bent to fill the water bag. When it was filled to the brim, he had taken some water in his cupped hand to drink and satisfy his killing thirst. But on second thoughts, he threw the water away. How could he drink water when Sakina and the children were still withering without water? With the water bag filled, he jumped back onto his horse and began his final journey back to the camps. When arrows were coming from all sides, Abbas only had one thought in his mind: how do I protect the water bag? Seeing Abbas was preoccupied with this thought, one treacherous enemy, hiding behind a sand dune, reached down, and he dealt a blow to Abbas's right hand. He cut off his right arm. In a flash, Abbas transferred his sword to his left hand, but within moments, a second blow was ruthlessly delivered to his left hand. Abbas now held the bag between his teeth. The only thought that came into his mind was to reach the camp and quench the thirst of his darling Sakina and the other children. A silent prayer escaped his lips.
Merciful Allah, spare me long enough to fulfill my mission.
But alas, that was not to be. An arrow pierced the water bag and water started gushing out of it. Was it the water that was flowing, or the hopes of Abbas? After all, it was Sakina's thirst that would remain unsatisfied. Another one of the enemies came near and struck Abbas with a mortal blow with an iron mace. He reeled over. He fell from his horse. With one last effort, with all the strength that was left in him, he shouted,
"Oh my master, come to me before I depart this world."
As if in answer to his prayers, he felt some footsteps near. His one eye had been blinded by an arrow, and the other had filled with blood. But despite this, his instincts told him that his brother was near. He felt his master kneeling down beside him, lifting his head and taking it up into his lap. Hussein with a muffled cry,
"Oh Abbas, my brother, what have they done to you?"
"You have come at last, my master. I thought I was not destined to have a last look at you. Thank God you are here."
With these words, he put his head on the sand. Tenderly, Hussein lifted his head back onto his lap, inquiring why had he removed it from there.
"My master, when you will be breathing your last, nobody will be there to put your head in the lap to comfort you. I want my head to lie on the sand like yours will at your time. I am your servant and you are my master. It is too much for me to put my head on your lap."
Hussein burst into tears. The sight of his brother laying down his dear life in his arms was heart-rending.
"My master, I have a last wish to express. When I die, do not carry my body to the camp. I promised to bring water to Sakina and I have failed. I cannot face her, even in death. The sight of my body lying next to her will kill her."
Hussein sobbingly promised him that he would carry out his last wish and added,
Oh Abbas, I too have a wish to be fulfilled. Since childhood, you have always called me master. But for once, I beg of you, call me brother before your soul leaves this world.
one brother looked at the other with a longing look, and Abbas was heard to whisper,
My brother, my brother.
and it was with these words he surrendered his soul to his maker. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just a reminder of tomorrow's midnight majalis. Inshallah, that will take place beginning from 12 a.m. And we have a night of musibah, a night of recitations and lamentations. It will take place at Al Hussein Masjid. The address and postcode is on the poster, and all the details are on the poster. So if I could request everyone to please come, bring your family, your friends. We have designed the event in a way where all languages are being catered for, whether that's recitations in Urdu, recitations in Persian, recitations in Arabic and English. So inshallah, we have an inclusive crowd and an inclusive community. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In regards to the program for the day of Ashura, it will begin after the Hurain. The Maqtal will be recited by Sheikh himself. Further details will be released soon, so please do keep an eye out on our social media for further details. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before I invite the Sheikh for his lecture tonight, if I could request the brothers once again at the back towards my right to please stand up and move a bit more forward and fill in the pockets of spaces to my left. Inshallah, we can create a crowd that is very enthusiastic and one with interaction with the Sheikh. So if I could please request everyone to please move as far forward possible, so it's easy as well for the brothers who are attending later to get a spot at the back. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, with your loudest salawat, if you could please welcome Sheikh Shabbar Mahdi to the minbar for tonight's lecture. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
There's a request before we begin for Dua Shifa for Fatima Bibi, the mother of Kashif Ali. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 وصل اللهم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعثي الأنبياء والمرسلين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنام سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين، الذين كلامهم نور وأمرهم رشد ووصيتهم التقوى وفعلهم الخير وعادتهم الإحسان وسجيتهم الكرم، لا سيما على الحسين المذلوم المقتول المجروح العطشان المذبوح من القفا في يوم عاشوراء في أرض كربلاء بلا جرم ولا خطأ، الذي غسله دمه وكفنه رمال كربلاء، مقطع الأعضاء مسلوب العمامة والرداء. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال مولانا أمير المؤمنين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه: من عرف نفسه فقد عرف ربه. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Please recite a second salawat. One of the most widely discussed short narrations of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is the narration where the Holy Imam Salamullah alayhi speaks about ma'rifatul Rabb, and the way within which a person can gain cognizance and ma'rifah and recognition and ilm and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the Imam very famously says, Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbah. There are a number of different ways within which a person can gain ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Quranul Kareem often speaks about the different turuq and the different paths for a person to gain ma'rifah and cognizance of Allah azza wa jal. And one of the greatest ways that a person can gain this ma'rifah and cognizance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through what has been mentioned by the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam himself when he says, Man arafa nafsa. Whoever has ma'rifah and gains ma'rifah and recognition of their nafs and their soul will be able to gain ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tonight I wish for us to focus on this hadith and see exactly what was being said by the Imam when he said, recognize yourself and you will recognize your Lord. Before we can go and look into this hadith and the details that exist, there is something very important to mention. And that is that these riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, like this one and others, have one of the greatest benefit to my life and your life. Discussing these narrations of the holy Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam allow us to reach one of the greatest goals of our hayat. For I remember on occasion it is mentioned that Ayatollah al-Udhma Burujardi, today you enter into the shrine of Sayyidah Ma'sooma salamullahi alayha in Qom, you will find that there is a separate grave opposite the masjid known as Masjid A'zam of Ayatollah al-Udhma Burujardi. Ayatollah al-Udhma Burujardi is sitting teaching in his class. When we're told that a person comes in and enters into this lesson, a person who hasn't seen Sayyid Burujardi for 30 years or more. The last time I met him was 30 years ago. This person must have been visiting the holy city of Qom. He decided also to see Sayyid Burujardi and visit his lesson. He says, as I entered into that gathering where Sayyid Burujardi was teaching his students, the students of the Hawza, I wanted to listen, what exactly is he speaking about today? Not that necessarily he could understand what it is, but let me hear what are they speaking about. And so when I entered in and I sat in that gathering, I heard Ayatollah al-Udhma Burujardi speaking about a certain hadith from the life of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And he was telling his students and explaining to them the meaning of a very short hadith. Like this hadith, Man arafa nafsa, faqad arafa rabbah. And so he was explaining to them this short hadith. This person began to think. And those that have narrated and written down this story, they say that the individual who this is about was known often to make remarks that were slightly inappropriate, or he speaks out of place sometimes. He says things that sometimes he shouldn't. He says, when I heard Ayatollah al-Udhma Burujardi speak about the tafsir of one of these riwayat of Amirul Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi, I began to think that 30 years ago, when I had seen this same Sayyid, he was speaking about the same thing. He was telling them about one of these riwayat of Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And Sayyid Burujardi, the time that this took place was the same time that the human being first visited the moon. And so as this discussion is taking place between student and teacher, this individual calls out and says, Sayyid, the human being has done great things. Insan has just reached the moon and you're still stuck on the same hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. You're still stuck on, for example, Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah. And you have a lot of this today as well. From the minbar, don't tell us about Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. These are old things. Tell us about something else. So what did Sayyid Burujardi reply? Sayyid Burujardi says, what's so strange that the human being has reached the moon? What is so special about that? This is one makhluk of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to another makhluk of Allah. One thing that has been created by Allah azza wa jal going to something else that has been created by Allah azza wa jal. Walakin, however, what me and my students are doing here is something much greater. He says, what do you mean? He says, that was one makhluk getting to a makhluk, one thing that has been created, getting to another thing that has been created, where us, through the kalam of Amirul Mu'mineen, we go from the makhluk and we get to the creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the benefit of looking at the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam, such as this, is that they take me to my Lord. And what is a greater goal than me being able to gain ma'rifah and recognition and cognizance of my Lord? If that has been understood, this hadith, Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah, even though it is well known to be quoted from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, we also find similar narrations from Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. A similar narration where a woman comes to the Prophet of Islam and says, Ya Rasulullah, is it possible for someone to gain ma'rifah of their Lord? And the Prophet of Islam says, yes, if they gain ma'rifah of their nafs, they shall gain ma'rifah of their Lord. So very similar to man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah is this hadith from the Prophet. Or for example, the narrations that says a'lamukum bi nafsihi a'lamukum bi rabbih. The person that has most knowledge of their nafs and their soul will have the most knowledge of their Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this regard, even we're told that there is a narration often quoted which says, "Utlubul ilm walau bis-sin." Gain knowledge even if you have to travel to China. This hadith itself, some people didn't accept it. Some people said it meant something else. There were a number of tafsir and explanations of that hadith. But one of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam comes and explains this hadith. "Utlubul ilm walau bis-sin." Gain knowledge even if you have to travel to China. They said this means gain knowledge of your nafs and your soul, even if you have to travel very far to gain knowledge of your nafs. And so we find a number of narrations of them, man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah, that speak about the idea of ma'rifatun nafs and ilmun nafs. And before we go to look at what it means, whoever recognizes their nafs recognizes their Lord, the discussion needs to be had, what is the meaning of the nafs in the first place? When I say nafs, what is nafs? And here certain scholars have quoted a very interesting example from Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. A very interesting example from the Holy Imam, and in fact certain scholars have said no one explained the relationship between nafs and body, soul and body like this example of Amirul Mu'mineen. For the Imam says the relationship between nafs wal jism, the soul and the body, is like the relationship bayn al-lafzi wal ma'na, is like the relationship between the word and its meaning. What does this mean? If I have a word that has no meaning, we have a relationship between these two things, a word and its meaning that comes in my mind. I say the word, for example, clock. However, when I say this word clock, a meaning enters into my mind, a picture of a clock may enter. There is word, lafz, and there is ma'na, meaning. The Imam says the relationship between my soul and my body is like the relationship between the word and its meaning. Why? For if I have a word without any meaning, it may be of some sort of very limited use for me. But the main use of a lafz and a word is only when it has meaning. Likewise, the use of the body is only present when a soul is mawjood and found within that body. Or for example, when I have a word that has a very sweet meaning, the word itself, the pronunciation may be difficult, but if the meaning is something beloved to me, that sweetness will travel from the meaning to the word. For example, a person may have someone he loves. The name of that person may be very difficult to pronounce, but because the meaning of this word is my beloved, I will love the word. Likewise, there may be a word that very easily flows from my tongue, a word that I'm easily able to pronounce. However, because the meaning is of something that I detest and hate, that hatred travels from ma'na to lafz, from the meaning to the word. Likewise, when the Imam says the relationship between body and soul is like that of word and meaning, the soul, if it is pure, that purity of the soul and that cleanliness of the soul will be also found in the body and expressed in the body. And if, however, that soul is one which is filled with impurity, that also shall be expressed where? To the body of the human being. Or for example, the scholars say, when I have word and meaning, lafz and meaning, what is intended? When a person has speech, and I'm using words right now, you don't concentrate on the words itself that I'm saying. You concentrate on the meaning. In fact, the scholars give the example of a mirror and a person standing in front of the mirror. When I stand in front of a mirror, do I look at what the mirror is like? Do I look at the design of the glass? Do I look at the design of the mirror? No. I look at the reflection in that mirror. Likewise, when a person says a certain word, I don't look at each letter in that word. And I don't concentrate on each letter of that word. Rather, I look at what is being reflected by that word, and that is what? That is the meaning. And so if this is the situation, that al-maqsood bil-asala huwa al-ma'na, that which I care about is the meaning and not the word. This is likewise when it comes to body and soul. That which the human being should care about is another person's nafs, another person's soul, not the person's body and their zahir. And so Amirul Mu'mineen explained to us this relationship of body and soul through word and meaning. Likewise, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi came and gave the example of if we have a small container within which I keep jewelry. There are precious stones, there are rings that I have that are very expensive, and I keep them in a wooden box. He says this is the example of a person's soul and a person's body. That the body is like that wooden box. The whole point of the body is to protect that which is within it, the soul, in the way that the whole point of this wooden box is to protect the jewels that are found within it. And in the way that the worth of the wooden box cannot be compared to the worth of the jewelry found within it, the worth of this body of mine and the color of my skin and the appearance that I have cannot be compared to my soul and what my soul has. And so we understand that the key part of my existence, that which makes me me, that which gives me my own identity is my nafs, not my body. For my body is constantly changing. My body is in constant development. It may be that I see a person after 20 years, I don't recognize them. I come, for example, from here, I leave, and I don't come to Manchester after 20 years. And I came back and I saw someone, and I didn't recognize them. Why did I not recognize them if they're the same person? If their identity is still one, why did I not recognize them? The answer comes, their body changed. I had recognized them based on their body, based on their form, based on their shakl. And because it changed, the way they look changed, this told me that the key part of his identity and character is not his body. Because if I was to identify him through that which was his key character, it would never change. And so a person's key identity is their nafs that doesn't change in the way that the appearance or the body changes. If this has been understood, before we go to look into the meaning of this hadith, man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah, the ulama give one example that I wish to present so that we can kind of get an understanding of what I mean by soul. The example that is given is a person is sitting in his car and he stops somewhere. He stops in the car, the engine is on. He's sitting in the seat. This is the example of me and you. What do we mean? We have the physical car, the body of the car, the metal, the shape, the paint, the wheels, the tires. This is like the physical body of the human being. Then we have the engine that is running, the engine that allows the car to move. Without an engine, there's going to be no movement, no harakah. And this is the example of a person's ruh, of a person's spirit. The spirit is something within me that gives me life, that allows my hair to grow, my nails to grow, my features to change, that allows me to breathe, that which gives me life in the way that the engine allows the car to move. And then you have the third component, which is the driver in the seat. The driver is the one that decides to turn right or turn left or go backwards or go forwards or stay stationary. And this is the example of the nafs. The nafs is that thing which is part and parcel of all of my actions, which is the one that makes me do something, which is the one that makes me angry, which is the one that makes me call out, the key part of my existence. If this has been understood, the scholars then came to look at this narration. Men, arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah. Recognize your nafs, you'll recognize your Lord. And here we find certain scholars mention 12, 13, 15 different interpretations of this riwayah. I wish to mention today just a few. The first idea that was mentioned about this narration that some scholars said was that what was being said is the opposite. What do we mean? Man arafa nafsa. If you recognize your soul, you'll recognize your Lord. Some said what was being said here is that in the way that it is impossible for you to recognize your nafs, it's impossible for you to get ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this riwayah wasn't telling me that I can gain ma'rifah of my Lord. The riwayah was telling me it's impossible to gain ma'rifah of your Lord in the way that you can't understand the nafs that you have within this body of yours. And this opinion was rejected by a number of scholars. They didn't accept this idea and this interpretation of the narration that what was being said is ma'rifatullah is impossible. The reason they gave for rejecting this opinion, some of them are very academic, which I can't go into at this moment in time. But one reason is very simple. We don't accept that even a part of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible. No, for we have so many examples in history of ma'soomeen, infallibles, and even those that weren't infallible that gained ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so how can you say that gaining ma'rifah of Allah azza wa jalla is impossible? Let me give you one example. Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, the holy Imam Salamullah alayhi is praying inside of his house. We have a narration, or a number of narrations rather, that speak about the importance of a person praying in the masjid as well as praying at home. For there was a time during the life of the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi where people would only pray in the masjid, even if it's their recommended prayers in the masjid, nawafil in the masjid, salatul layl in the masjid, and the 5 daily prayers in the masjid. And the Prophet of Islam then told people, also pray in your house. So there is a recommendation for a person to pray, for example, Salatul Jama'ah in a masjid, which is highly recommended. But there is also a recommendation to pray some of the nawafil and recommended prayers in your house. And you'll find that some of the A'immah, they would pray the nafila in their house, then they'd go to pray the faridah in the masjid. Amir al-Mu'mineen in Kufa, he prays Salatul Layl all night in his house. Then he prays Salatul Fajr in Masjid Kufa. So Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam is indulged in prayer in his house. And as he is praying, suddenly he hears, the narration says, there is a loud scream, and the mother of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam enters into the room. She enters in crying and wailing and saying, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Ya Abul Hassan, your son has fallen into one of the very deep wells of Medina. And she's of course worried that if he's fallen into one of the deep wells of Medina, he's going to die, he's going to drown, anything that can happen. However, as we know, the state of Imam Sajjad salamullah alayhi is such that no matter what is in front of him, and of course he knows in his heart what is going to take place. It's not like it was a dangerous situation and he ignored it. No, he knows in his heart what will take place. The outcome of this incident is known to him with the ilm that he has from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam continues in his prayer. A number of moments pass, the mother is crying, the mother is wailing, the people in the house also are very distressed. What will have happened to Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam? The Imam continues in his ibadah and worship until a number of minutes pass. After he finishes the salah that he was in, he gets up. He says, yes. She says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Ya Abul Hassan, your son has fallen into the well, one of the most deepest wells of Medina. So without saying anything, he takes his abba, his cloak, he puts it on his shoulders, and he comes out of the house. Now, of course, there is a scene that has been created. A number of companions are also with the holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. A number of these companions are with him when they see the Imam get to the well in which Imam Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam has fallen in. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam looks to the sky. He prays to Allah Azza wa Jal, and as soon as he does so, the narration isn't clear, but somehow some said, for example, the water itself began to rise. Whatever took place, the Imam is able to take his son out of the well, and the narration says that the clothing of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam wasn't even touched by the water that was in the well. And Imam al-Baqir salamullah alayhi was busy whilst in the well doing ibadah and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Zainul Abidin takes his son al-Baqir salamullah alayhi as if nothing has happened and goes back to his house. And as this is being done, one of the companions said, I had the jur'ah, I had the courage to ask. I said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, can I ask you a question? He said, no problem. When you came here and you did that dua, oh Allah, keep my son safe, how did you know that Allah would answer you? How are you so relaxed and tranquil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep your son safe and there's not even one part of his clothing that has become wet, let alone a scratch on his face, a scratch on his hand? How were you so sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect your child? And so the Imam Salamullah alayhi responds by saying, if I never had any shortcomings in doing his ibadah with ma'rifah of who he was, I knew that Allah would never have any shortcomings in answering my prayers. This is one example of an Imam Ma'soom that had such ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he prays his salah, he prays it having that complete level of understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's position. And this is just one example of many. And someone may come and say, but this is Imam Ma'soom. You can have example after example of a non-Ma'soom that gained ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this first opinion of man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah was rejected. The second opinion that was mentioned is what this was saying is look and think about your nafs and your soul. And think about what you require, what your nafs needs, and you will understand that exactly the opposite of your nafs is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? Meaning one of the ways that I can get ma'rifah of something is by looking at its opposite. تُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاءُ بِأَذْدَادِهَا. I want to understand nur, I need to look at dhulma and darkness. I wish to understand husn, that which is good, I need to understand evil. When I look at opposites, I can easily gain ma'rifah of the other thing. Some said this is what was being said by this narration, that I am completely opposite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If therefore I understand myself through this understanding of opposite, I will understand my Lord. What do we mean? My nafs is completely dependent every single moment of my life. Me as my soul requires food. The body and the soul requires oxygen every single moment. There are so many things that I am dependent upon. And so if I had ma'rifah that my nafs is such that it is completely dependent, through this I can understand the opposite of this is what? The opposite is that being that is completely independent in his life. Or for example, my nafs is weak. Very easily I see something, I'm tempted. My nafs is very weak and da'if. From this I understood the complete power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had. My nafs is completely ignorant. There are so many things that I have no knowledge of. In fact, every moment in my life, if I was to gain knowledge and knowledge and knowledge, it still wouldn't be enough. From this I understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is He who has complete knowledge. And so some said what was meant by man arafa nafsa is ponder upon yourself. You will find yourself to be complete opposite to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I get tired, I fall asleep. I need food. I fall unwell. All of these are limitations. From understanding the limitations of my nafs, I understood the unlimited nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In addition to this, if I look at my nafs and I see what does my nafs desire, here the ulama have a very interesting discussion. My nafs, when it came into this world, desired a number of things. My nafs desires happiness. The nafs of a person wishes to be youthful for the rest of their life. The nafs of a person wishes to be healthy for the rest of their life. The nafs has certain desires. However, a person only gains true ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they realize that whatever I desire in this world, the best form of that can only be found with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I, for example, desire happiness, and I look for happiness here and there in the world when I don't realize complete happiness can only be found where? With Allah azza wa jal. I want, for example, to physically be desired and be able to fulfill my physical desires. The best form of fulfilling physical desires will be found in Jannah. That I will eat things that I've never eaten before. And I will be given bounties like I've never been given before. Whatever the human being desires in this world, the perfect form of all of those desires can be found by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that was one of the meanings of man arafa nafsa. Understand what you need and then realize that the perfect form of this need is with Allah azza wa jal. And I remember on one occasion, Dhul Qarnayn, who according to most wasn't a prophet of God. Quran al-Karim speaks about Dhul Qarnayn and his story, but he wasn't a prophet of God in the eyes of most. Dhul Qarnayn has a number of different journeys that he takes on this earth. He takes one to the most westernly part of the globe, and one to the most easternly, and then he also travels towards the east. On one occasion when Dhul Qarnayn is traveling, and when he travels, he is a king, he is a ruler, he has thousands of people with him. Thousands of soldiers, thousands of people with the army, horses, all of this. Thousands of people were traveling in one of the expeditions of Dhul Qarnayn. When in the middle of the street, Dhul Qarnayn finds a person busy in sajdah, busy in sujood and prostration. Now me and you were in sajdah, we're praying salah, I hear one thing, I hear 2, 3 things around me, I get distracted. The nature of the human being, he wants to look back. Or for example, if there is a sound that takes place at the back of this hall, most of you will look behind you. We get distracted easily. This person, Dhul Qarnayn says, there were thousands of people marching, and this person keeps his head in sajdah. At least you'd be curious, why is there the sound of such a large army, and who is this army? But the person keeps his head in sujood. And this attracts Dhul Qarnayn. Who is this individual? That his head stays in prostration. And so Dhul Qarnayn stops. He comes off his horse, he taps that person on the shoulder, the person looks at him, lifts his head up and says, yes, Dhul Qarnayn says, I want someone like you to be with me at all times. I've seen your ibadah, your spirituality, the amount that you wish to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, join me. I'll take you with my expeditions, I will benefit from you as someone who is an abid and a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the person says, look, if you can give me certain things, I'll come with you. He says, no problem. What do you need? He says, give me youth without old age and health without sickness. Give me youth without old age, health without sickness, and happiness without grief. Can you give this to me? So Dhul Qarnayn says, I don't have the power to give this to you. None of these things I can give to you. This person says, then leave me with that deity and being that can give me all of these things. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can give me that which my nafs desires to the perfect form. This was the second understanding of man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah. The third, and this slightly requires attention because it's slightly complicated. The third understanding of man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah is look at your body and soul and understand that to be ka'annahu a complete universe. As Amirul Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi himself says, that the human being, his body and soul, is like a universe in itself. And think about body and soul. The body, can it see the nafs? No. Likewise, me in this universe, can I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Of course not. If I am walking suddenly and something hits my toe, there's a small pin or needle and it hits my toe. Suddenly, even though I may not have seen it, my nafs can experience the pain. Why? Because your nafs is such that no matter what takes place in the body, wherever it is in the body, the nafs has the knowledge of it and the nafs experiences it. One of the qualities of the nafs, no matter what takes place in the body, the nafs is aware. Likewise, no matter what takes place in this universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of that thing. When I move my hand to the right or move my left hand, who is doing this? My nafs. For the nafs is that which allows the body to move, allows the body to do that which it wishes to. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is He who allows the universe to be in the way that it is, for the universe to work. Before the body was placed and created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the nafs was already there. The nafs was already there in alamul arwah, the realm of the souls, after which my body was created. And once my body then is buried 6 feet under the ground, the nafs remains. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was present before the human being and the universe was created. And after the universe may go in the day of Qiyamah and the earth may go, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remains. So you find a number of similarities between the relationship of my nafs and my body and the relationship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this world. This is something that the scholars had mentioned. The fourth understanding of this riwayah is that, look, the riwayah wasn't saying that gaining ma'rifah of your nafs is impossible, therefore ma'rifah of Allah is impossible. Rather, what it was saying is no matter how much ma'rifah of your nafs you can gain, it won't be enough. Because your nafs is so detailed. In this world, whilst I live in this world, with this body, I can never get complete ma'rifah of my nafs. No matter how much ma'rifah and knowledge I have of my soul, it will be incomplete. Likewise, no matter how much knowledge you have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that knowledge can still go further. Here, for example, if you look in the Holy Quran, the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do a dua. قَالِ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Ya Allah, increase in my knowledge. So a person may ask, we always heard that the infallibles have perfect knowledge. They have ilm ghaib that has been given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon them knowledge of the unseen, that when they wish to know something, Allah places that knowledge in their hearts. If this is the case, why is it that then the Prophet of Islam is being told to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase in his knowledge? For an increase in knowledge only takes place when knowledge is incomplete. How can the Prophet of Islam have knowledge which is incomplete when we believe he brings the Sharia down to us with complete knowledge of Sharia, with complete knowledge of Deen? And so how do we bring these two things together? One says, oh Allah, increase in my knowledge. The other side is that he has perfect knowledge. He is Rasul, Ma'soom, Nabi. The answer that was given is that the knowledge of the Prophet of Islam and other infallibles is of different types. One type of knowledge that they had was knowledge of what we call haqa'iqul kharijiyya, physical realities of this world. Knowledge of science and mathematics and these type of things. And the belief of the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalatu wassalam is that they were given this knowledge perfectly. That you will find Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi teaching the other sciences to his students. Ahlul Bayt were given this knowledge perfectly. The second type of knowledge is ilm ma kan wa ma yakun. Knowledge of that which took place in the past and knowledge of that which shall take place in the future. Also, we believe that Ahlul Bayt were given this perfectly, that if they wished to know what was going to happen in the future, Allah would give them that knowledge. And if they wished to know that which has taken place in the past, Allah would provide them that knowledge. However, the third type of knowledge is different. The third type of knowledge is ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge of Allah azza wa jal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is He limited or unlimited? Allah is unlimited. If something is unlimited, its knowledge shall also be unlimited. If you have, for example, a module in physics, chemistry, mathematics, whatever it may be, because the science itself is limited, its knowledge will be limited. There's a time that I can complete this module in, for example, a few months and a few years. But if the thing itself that I'm gaining knowledge of is an unlimited reality, no matter how much knowledge I can gain of that thing, it's not enough. And so when the Prophet of Islam said, Rabbi zidni ilma, ya Allah, increase in my knowledge, he wasn't referring to the first type, nor was he referring to the second type. He was saying, increase my knowledge in you. For no matter how much knowledge I have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not enough. No matter how much ma'rifah I have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I can always go one step further. And so this was one understanding of man arafa nafsa. You can never gain complete understanding of your nafs. You can always go further. Likewise with ma'rifah of Allah azza wa jal. If all of these discussions have been understood, the scholars, however, said the last meaning is that which has been focused upon the most. Of this statement, understand your nafs, you will understand your Lord. And that was, understand your soul and purify it. For if you do tazkiyah of your nafs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place His ma'rifah in your heart. This was the most famous interpretation of this hadith. Man arafa nafsa, I understand and look at the vices and impurities that your nafs has. Look at the sins that you commit. Look at the carnal desires that your nafs holds that it shouldn't. Gain ma'rifah, i.e. remove them from your heart, then you will be able to gain ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For those that did tazkiyatul nafs, those that purified their soul, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them that ma'rifah. And this was the greatest way to gain ma'rifah. To understand what are my carnal desires. A person may say, how? How can I see whether my nafs rushes towards haram or not? How can I see whether I'm able to control my carnal desires or not? One way to do so, I'll mention two. One way to do so is the scholars see if you are able to control your tongue. When I speak, for example, and I'm in conversation with someone and something pops into my mind, and I'm about to do ghibah of someone else, am I able to control my tongue, or do I do the ghibah? When I'm angry and I shouldn't say something, but something comes out of my mouth which is inappropriate, am I able to hold it or not? If a person wishes to see whether they are able to control their carnal desires and their nafs, see whether you can control your tongue. Secondly, to ensure that you have done tazkiyah or you start to do tazkiyah of your own soul, always look at your niyyah and intention. That when you came to the masjid, when you came to the majlis of Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, ask yourself the question, why? Before you enter in, why am I coming here? Before I pray salah, think about it. Why am I doing this? Before I volunteer in the Husayniyah, think about why I'm doing it. If you think about your niyyah every time you perform an action, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow you to purify your niyyah and purify your nafs. And let me give you one example. Sheikh Abbas Qummi, rahmatullah alayhi, is one of those scholars who was known for his sincerity. And Sheikh Abbas Qummi, you all know because you have read and seen Mafatih al-Jinan, his most famous work on supplication. Sheikh Abbas Qummi at one point in time lived in Mashhad. And whilst living in Mashhad, he was invited during Shahr Ramadan to lead the prayers in the masjid known as Masjid Gawhar Shad, which is part of the shrine of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The Salatul Dhuhrain, he was invited to lead Salatul Dhuhrain in the Masjid Gawhar Shad, the well-known masjid in the shrine. He began leading the prayers of Dhuhrain, Shahr Ramadan. And we're told that because people heard that Sheikh Abbas is the one that is leading the prayers, Sheikh Abbas Qummi, who is well known for his purity, that many people started attending that Salatul Jama'ah. A number of people would pray behind him. A number of people would follow him in Salah. Until after not even 10 days had passed of the 30 days of Shahr Ramadan, that Sheikh Abbas Qummi says, I can't attend the prayers anymore, I can't lead the prayers, please find someone else. So no one questioned him and asked him why. They respected his decision and they found someone else to lead the prayers, until someone afterwards met Sheikh Abbas in someone's house, Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi, and they asked him, what's the reason that suddenly you stopped leading the prayers? He says, because on one occasion, I had entered to lead al-Dhuhrain, and I was leading the Salatul Dhuhr. And I was in the 4th rak'ah. And as I was in the 4th rak'ah, I was in ruku'. And a person had come and he was obviously delayed to the prayers. And what would he do normally when he comes late? He calls out, Ya Allah. So that I delay lifting my head up from ruku' so that he can join in my ruku'. If he doesn't join in the ruku', he has to wait until the next rak'ah, but this is the 4th. So he says, Ya Allah, so I could delay the ruku' so that he can join in the jama'ah. However, when I heard his Ya Allah, I heard his voice to be very far away. What did this tell me? This told me that this person has just come, but there are so many people that have attended this jama'ah that he's right at the back of this masjid. And so for a split second, something entered into my heart that, mashallah, how many people are praying behind Sheikh Abbas Qummi? He said, this small amount of happiness entered into my heart. That look how many people came to pray behind me. As soon as that small amount entered into my heart, he said, I stopped. I finished Dhuhr. If it was someone who was very religious, they would finish Salatul Asr, then they would leave. Someone else who doesn't care, he would wait and he would love it and he would pray the Salatul Jama'ah to the rest of his life. If it was someone religious, they pray Asr, then they leave. Sheikh Abbas Qummi says, I didn't even pray Asr. As soon as this entered into my heart, I stopped it right there. Why? Tazkiyatun nafs. I want my nafs to be pure. I want to do only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there and then I told someone behind me, I can't lead the Asr prayers. Someone else should come, and straight away I left the masjid. And from that day I haven't returned to the salah, for I realized I'm not worthy of leading the mu'mineen and Muslimeen in prayer. Tazkiyatun nafs is this, where I think about my intention. That which I do solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I try to control my carnal desires From this I get ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If all of these discussions have been understood, from this then maybe we can understand a glimpse of the status of Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. Why? Because he shows us on the day of Ashura how much control he has on his nafs. For someone who has so much strength, someone who has so much courage, someone who is such a good fighter, it is very difficult for them to control their nafs when they're told, put your sword down. But look at the nafs of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Look at the ma'rifah of Abul Fadl, that my master Hussein tells me not to fight, even though I see bodies in front of me, even though I see shuhada, that I have trained, that I have taught how to fight, Abbas doesn't remove his sword from his sheath. Likewise, here for example in Manchester and London, it gets a bit hot and suddenly we become very thirsty. Suddenly it's very difficult for us to live in 30-degree weather, for example. Imagine the state of Abul Fadl al-Abbas in the heat of Karbala. He who has spent all day picking up bodies with his brother and master Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, how thirsty would he be? Until Abul Fadl al-Abbas gets to that water. Me, it's 30-degree heat, I need to drink as much as I can. Very quickly my mouth becomes dry. Very quickly my lips become dry. Think about the mouth and lips of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. And look at the control that he has on his nafs, that he places his hands in the water. He places his hands in the water, and what does he say? Ya nafs min ba'd al-Husayn huni. Oh nafs, how can you make me drink water when Hussein is thirsty? How can I drink the water of the Euphrates when Hussein and his children are thirsty? He throws that water down. If this is the state of the tazkiyah and control that he has of his nafs, the riwayah said, أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِنَفْسِهِ أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِرَبِّهِ. Imagine how much ma'rifah he has of his Lord and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last year an alim had passed away in Iran. And when he passed away, people began quoting certain things that he wrote in his books, certain stories of his life. This alim, he lived in Iran. He had studied in Najaf al-Ashraf during the time of Ayatollah al-Udhma Khoi. He mentions a story. He says, on one occasion I had finished the lesson with Sayyid Khoi, and as I was about to leave, I saw Sayyid Khoi, and Sayyid Khoi said to me, Sheikh, where are you going now? I realized he wants me to go with him somewhere. I said, Sayyidina, if you want to go anywhere, I'll come with you. Sayyid Khoi says, there's a Fatiha, there is a majlis for someone who has just passed away. Will you come with me? I said, no problem. I went with Sayyid Khoi to the Fatiha, to the majlis. We sat down. They bought, for example, the Qur'ans. We began reciting Qur'an for the marhum. I didn't know who it was. Sayyid Khoi is there sitting, reading the Qur'an, when suddenly I saw him cry very heavily, weeping. I thought it must be that he's very close to the marhum, very close to the deceased, if he's crying so much. After we finished the Majlis Fatiha and we got up, when we got to the streets of Najaf, I said, Sayyidina, I didn't know you know this person so well. Sayyid Khoi says, I don't know this person that well. I barely know him, but just out of respect, I knew someone that knew him. Whatever, I came to the majlis. He says, why then were you crying so much? He says, because you didn't hear what that person said. He says, no. He says, the reciter of Quran, as he was reciting Quran, and when he finished, he stopped and he said, my condolences to the brother of the marhum. My condolences to the brother of the marhum. At that moment I began to cry. Why? How lucky this brother is that he has someone to give him condolences. But what was the state of Hussein on the day of Ashura? That when his brother left this world, there was no one to give condolences to Hussein alayhi salam. There was no one to give condolences to Hussein for the loss of his brother Abul Fadl al-Abbas. For Abul Fadl al-Abbas and his loyalty and his courage and his shahada is something that was remembered from the time of Amirul Mu'mineen For they say when Amirul Mu'mineen was on his deathbed and his family would be surrounding him, and Imam Amirul Mu'mineen would tell all of his children, all of you shall place your hands in the and place their hands in the hands of Imam al-Hasan, except for my son Abul Fazl al-Abbas. You didn't tell him to also place his hand in the hand of Imam al-Hasan. Why, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? What did Abbas do? And so suddenly Amir al-Mu'mineen would tell Imam, and he would take the hand of Abul Fadl and say, because the hand of Abul Fadl for Hussein, a time would come in Ashura when many of the shuhada, their bodies have been lifted from the battlefield. Abul Fadl would say that now we have not had any water for a number of days. I can hear the children crying, Al-Atayash, Al-Atayash, crying of thirst. He would say, Ibn Rasulullah, do you give me permission to get some water? And I will not fight, I will only go to the Furat. What was the response of Imam Hussein when he was asked this? He was told, first take permission from your sister Zainab, then I will allow you to go. Abul Fadl enters into the tent of Zainab al-Kubra. He asks her for permission. She says, Ya Abul Fadl, please sit down. Abul Fadl would sit down. Zainab will feed like the lion of Allah. And when people would see Abul Fadl, they would be unable to fight him. And some would come in groups trying to attack him, and he would defend himself like the son of Amirul Mu'mineen until he would get to the Euphrates. He takes the water in his hands. He says, Ya nafs min ba'd al-Husayn huni. He fills the container of water. He says, O nafs, while Hussein and the children of Hussein are thirsty, Abul Fadl never will taste this water. He returns towards the tents. When suddenly as Abul Fadl al-Abbas returns to the tents, they would never have been able to do this face to face. One of the people says, I was hiding behind a tree. Abul Fadl went past the tree, and from behind I cut his right hand. He would say, In qata'tum an yamini, inni uhayami abadan an dini. Cut my right hand, I will still protect Islam. For Abbas has his left hand. He would go past another tree. Another would come from behind, strike the left arm of Abul Fadl. The container would be in his mouth. Suddenly then someone shoots an arrow in his eye. They say in the shrine of Abul Fadl, a person was on the mimbar reciting the musibah of Abul Fadl, and he recited that an arrow pierced the eye of Abul Fadl al-Abbas. One of the ulama says, I was sitting there. Sheikh Yahya, he says, I was sitting there. Suddenly I cried and cried and cried until I fainted. When I regained consciousness, I told the orator, never mention this masa'ib, for it is too severe. He says, I went to my house that night, and in my dream I saw Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and he said, why did you stop him mentioning this musibah? For do you not know they shot the arrow in my eye, and when someone has something in their eye, they use their hands to remove it. but I did not have my hands, so I would try to remove it with my feet. When suddenly someone would strike him on his head, he would fall on the ground. He would say, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Hussein rushes towards the battlefield, picks up the right hand, picks up the left hand. Al-ayan inkasara dhari. Now my back has broken. لما قتل العباس بان الانكسار في وجه الحسين. Hussein gets to the body, he sees blood is covering his eyes. Hussein takes the head of Abbas, places it in his lap. Look at the loyalty in his last moments. Abbas places his head on the ground. Hussein places it on his lap. He places it on the ground. Hussein says, Abbas, allow your head to be in my lap. Abbas says, I am thinking in my last moments, my head is in your lap, but in your last moments you will have no lap for your head. Then he looks at Hussein. He says, when I came into this world, I saw your face. As I leave this world, I wish to see your face. But oh Hussein, one eye has an arrow, the other is filled with blood. He says, Hussein, never would I ask you, but please remove the blood from my eyes. And I would have done it myself, but I do not have any arms. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. يا عباس.
Hi Abbas, hi Abbas, hi Abbas, everyone, hi Abbas, hi Abbas, hi Abbas, hi Abbas. Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. Hai Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. Hoya Karbal, hoya Karbal, hoya Karbal, de vich juda ghazi. Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. मिलके पढ़िएगा. Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. Zahra jaya daya sira ghazi. Zahra jaya.
Ragazi Zara Jaya Das Ragazi Zara Jaya Das Ragazi Zara Jaya Zara Jaya Das Ragazi Zara Jaya Das Ragazi. सब मिलकर Zara Jaya Das کربل ہویا کربل ہویا کربل دے جدا غازی زارا جائیاں داسرا غازی زارا جائیاں داسرا غازی
زہرا جایا داسرا ہائے زہرا جایا
ہویا کربل ہویا کربل ہویا کربل دے جدا غازی زارا جائیاں داسرا غازی زارا جائیاں داسرا غازی
زہرا جایا
زارا جائیاں داسرا غازی زارا جائیاں خیم جل دے رہے او آندھی رہی 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 شمر دوان کے بچا غازی زارا جائیاں داسرا
ہائے زہرا جایا داسرا. بس مصائب کی دو میں سے سنیں گا کہ چھ جگہ تو حسین چنیا ہے اور چھ جگہ تو حسین چنیا ہے ارے پھر بھی پورا نہ مل سکا غازی. یا زہرا زہرا جایا داسرا غازی زہرا جایا ہے شمر رج رج شمر رج رج حسین کو مارے شمر رج رج حسین کو مارے ہر جانتا ہے جو نہیں رہا غازی. زہرا جایا دایا سرا غازی زہرا جایا زہرا زہرا ہائے چہرہ زمیں پہ پہلے گرا ہائے چہرہ زمیں پہ پہلے گرا زین سے اس طرح گرا غازی. زہرا جایا داسرا غازی یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا
صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. Hardship that shakes the mountains and turns them into sand as I fell from my horse without my hands. Hardship that shakes the mountains. Can you just ask them to put the words up, please? Yeah? Afwan. Hardship that shakes the mountains, turns them to sand. As I fell from my horse with no two hands, should I fall onto my back or onto my chin? Amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me. I know that the chorus is a little bit long, Shabab, but inshallah, Abu Fazl Abbas deserves your help. And just do whatever you can, inshallah, just as long as you're reading from your heart. There's no expectations. Hardship that shakes the mountains, turns them to sand. As I fell from my horse with no two hands, should I fall onto my back or onto my chin? Amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me. Hardship that shakes the mountains, turns them to sand. As I fell from my horse with no two hands, should I fall onto my back or onto my skin? Amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me. Samihini. They say history is written by the victors. They say history is written by the victors, and the shadow of a shout is but a whisper, but a whisper. So-called victors of Ashur paint the picture of the whisper that deafens every listener, every listener. 72 men and a handful of kin, all but perish. So tell me, who is narrating? Who's narrating? The truth will always outshine oppression's peak. Behind the enemy lines, they themselves speak. Astonished when they saw young men bravely standing. Amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me. Hardship, hardship that shakes the mountains, turns them to sand. As I fell from my horse with no two hands, should I fall onto my back or onto my chin? Amidst all this, my concern was seeping from me. Please forgive. Ya Hussein, I chose to fall off onto my chin. When did I give hardship my back? Why now begin? No eye to brace me for meeting the harsh ground, like the surprise of death's call when the call sounds. No arms to soften my fall, oh what a test. My only arms are the arrows sticking. No arms to soften, no arms to soften, no arms to soften my fall, oh what a test. The only arms are the arrows dug in my chest, dug in my chest. Put aside all of the arrows and my vision. What will I say tomorrow to your children? Waiting by the 10th Rughayah, prays that I win. And amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me, please forgive me, hardship, hardship that shakes the mountain. Sand as I fell from my horse with no two hands. Should I fall onto my back or onto my chin? Amidst all this, my concern was the water skin seeping from me. Please forgive me. As we mentioned, for Aun and Muhammad alayhim salam, Karbala was mixed with feelings of sadness, but there was also an overpowering feeling of pride, and nobody represented that pride better than Abul Fazl Abbas alayhi salam. So it's worth remembering his bravery as well as his sadness. Look at the display he made. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl. Hold your head high when you say his name. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Abu Akhu Zainab, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Khuf, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl. As you are doing Latum, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl. Isma', if you ever wondered, if you ever wondered, then bring your ear closer. If you ever pondered on who is Al-Abbas, on who is Al-Abbas, a part of the answer is Haydar, his father, Fatima, his mother. What more could a son ask? What more could a son? His lineage and his caste only have a part to play. His lineage and his caste only have a part to play. He is just Al-Abbas. Abu Fazl is his name. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl. يا ابو فاضل يا ابو اسمع اسمع حيدر علي trained you, the moon Ali named you. Haydar Ali trained you, the moon Ali named you. Haydar Ali trained you, the moon Ali named you. For this day he raised you, he put Zainab in your trust, put Zainab in your trust, he put Zainab in your trust, put Zainab in your trust. Haydar Ali trained you, the moon Ali named you. For this day he raised you, he put Zainab in your trust, put Zainab in your trust. When she will stand under the heat with no help, your flag will be her shelter. When your shadow will cast, when your shadow will block the sun from her path. This is Zainab bint Ali, block the sun from her path. This is Zainab bint Ali, light her way, Ya Abbas, like the moon lights the valley. Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl. I think he deserves your voices. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl. Asma, Asma, standing by the river, they call him the quencher. Standing by the river, they call him the quencher. Like Haidar in Kawthar, like Haidar on the Kawthar. He made his final stars, he made his final star. If he would have taken one drop, don't be mistaken. If he would have taken one drop, don't be mistaken. He would have begun breaking that army like the glass, the army like the moon pulls the vast, like the moon pulls the vast ocean waves, and then it stopped. It's a shame from Abbas when he did not taste a drop. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl. And there was a battle when Abu Fazl Abbas alayhi salam was younger. If I'm not mistaken, there was a battle that he entered and he had his mask on, and they thought that it was Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam until he took off his mask and they realized, the battle of Zamja, mistaken for Haida. The battle of Zamja, mistaken for Haida. Like Hussein in Karbala, la, this is Abbas, la, la, this is Abbas, la, la, this is Abbas, la, la, this is Abbas. Fighting with his mask on, fighting with his mask on, fighting till the last one of the enemies passed on. Then he took off his mask, then he took off his. When he took off his mask, when he took off his mask, picture the look on their face. He was just Al-Abbas. Haidar sent him out to play. Abu Fazl, Ya 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 Abu Fazl. Allah, Allah, the battle of Zamja, mistaken for Haida. The battle of Zamja, mistaken for Haida. Like Hussein in Karbala, la, this is Abbas, la, la, this is Abbas. Fighting with his mask on, fighting with his mask on, fighting till the last one from the enemies passed on. Then he took off his mask, then he took off his. When he took off his mask, when he took off his mask, picture the look on their face. He was just Al-Abbas. Haidar sent him out to play. Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Allah, Allah, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl, Ya Abu Fazl. Oh, Sister Zainab, I will not be returning. Leave the tent, they are burning with the fire. I'm laying somewhere headless. Abbas has no right or left by the river. Oh, Sister Zainab, I will not be returning. Leave the tents, they are burning with the fire. I'm laying somewhere headless. Abbas has no right or left by the river. Oh, Sister Zainab, with your words you'll defend me when Yazid will present me a head on a plate. The earrings from Medina I gifted to Sakina will be torn off. Oh, Sister Zainab, The hands of your brother will be carried as the blood spills. You will witness as you take a second glance. You'll see my head on a lance, reading verses. Oh, Sister Zainab, I wish that I could aid you. The armies will parade you. No one will help. You will not be supported. The truth will be aborted. So be patient. Oh, Sister Zainab, I will not be returning. They are burning with the fire. I'm laying somewhere headless. Abbas has no right or left by the river. Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. يا أبا الفضل لو صحت تهتز السماوات. يا أبا الفضل لو صحت تهتز السماوات. يا أبا الفضل لو صحت تبقى محنا هيهات. يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل يا أبا سين مجنونك سين مجنونك سين مجنونك سين مجنونك سين مجنونك أظل مجنونك سين مجنونك أظل مجنونك. أنا ما أقدر أنا ما أقدر أعيش بدونك أعيش بدونك. يا أبا الفضل when I call you I am pleasing al-Hussein. يا أبا الفضل when I call you I am pleasing al-Hussein. يا أبا الفضل you're the pride of Fatima أم البنين. يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل سين سلطاني سين سلطاني سين سلطاني سين سلطاني دليل إيماني سين سلطاني دليل إيماني. تظل عنواني تظل عنواني. عشقتك أني عشقتك أني. يا أبا الفضل if you had taken a sip from the river. يا أبا الفضل if you had taken a sip from the river. يا أبا الفضل with your sword all over your foes you deliver. يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل. Saying I'm crazy, they call me crazy. Saying I'm crazy, they call me crazy. Saying مجنونك saying سلطاني saying قرآني saying عين الله saying وجه الله saying عين الله saying وجه الله saying مجنونك saying عنواني saying سلطاني saying قرآني saying I'm crazy if they call me crazy. For your love Mawla, for your love Mawla. Sakina train me, Sakina train me. Ya Abba al-Fadl, with no hand you hit the floor without your sight. Ya Abba al-Fadl, with no hand you hit the floor without your sight. Ya Abba al-Fadl, take my eyes and take my left and take my right. Ya Abba al-Fadl, Ya Abba al-Fadl, Ya Abba al-Fadl. Sain Aynullah, Sain Wajhullah, Sain Aynullah, Sain Wajhullah. على فقدك ظهره على فقدك ظهره انكسر وويله انكسر وويله. يا أبا الفضل with no hand you hit the floor without your sight. يا أبا الفضل with no hand you hit the floor without your sight. يا أبا الفضل take my eyes and take my left and take my right. يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل يا أبا الفضل. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين.
یا حسین 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 everyone یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین ہے نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام نہ بجدے گھوڑے جیو نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جان نعتوں کے گل وچ سجاد پاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا نہ کلا اکبر دی لاش چاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا نہ کلا اکبر دی لاش چاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نعتوں کے گل وچ سجاد پاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا جے میرے غازی نو تو لڑن دی کدی اجازت حسین دیندا نہ کلا اکبر دی لاش چاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام جاندی نہ بجدے گھوڑے تو غازی لاندا نہ سر برہ نہ میں شام یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین تیرا لہو رائے گا نہ جائے گا، تیرا لہو رائے گا نہ جائے گا، بہن کا وعدہ ہے یہ رنگ ضرور لائے گا، ہے دین کی بقا بنا لا الہ حسین بادشاہ۔
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Please face the Qibla, please. دعاء الفرج. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه